Okay, then we're here at EA Play 2019. I'm sitting, on the first floor of the Palladium in what you said was the part of the club that you would never get to.
No, they'll never let me in this place. It's too fancy for me.
I'm here with Ryan MacArthur. And what's your official title for the Battlefield team?
Yes, it's the live producer for Battlefield.
Live producer for Battlefield. Okay, that's a juicy title.
It sounds super important, doesn't it?
It's definitely
It's not really, but
it's definitely super important.
it gives the world someone to focus on.
Someone to point at.
Yes, or that we can go with that one. It's probably. But yeah, I think the goal for us is to sort of, to provide the overall direction for the service and where we're going to go, and sort of take all the feedback from data, community, players, team, and kind of drive the roadmap forward.
Okay, interesting. So let's dive into the roadmap that you guys released yesterday. Adding some more content in there, and with the trailer as well that you released a few days ago, adding some more content in there that perhaps maybe people weren't 100% expecting, especially considering what's happened over the last 6 months or so. When I look at it, let's talk about Sundan first. What was the inspiration for that? Was that a map that you guys had always planned to make? Was it something that you looked at the roadmap and went, maybe we could fill this gap, or what was the story behind that one?
Well, I think it's something through development in the very beginning when the guys were building the war story under No Flag. They had they kind of built this thing to sort of be a multiplayer experience. So from the beginning, they'd always looked at it as something they wanted to turn into a multiplayer map. And so that was always there in the back of everybody's mind. And as we started to run the live service, and obviously in the beginning since launch, and there was a lot of things we had to do and improve and fix and Firestorm and all these things. And the good thing was we had guys kind of sitting there and they really wanted to make this, and they kind of came to a point one day and we said, you know what, let's go and just go. And they sat down and they kind of drove through, and they put it together, and they kind of worked with the team, and they kind of created. It was sort of one of those projects that are sort of the real things that make dev teams really go, when you're kind of like, you kind of get to do it and drive it on your own. And when it landed, we're like, cool, it's ready to go. And so it's kind of one of those things that rather than sort of committing to a thing and then having to push it, it was one of those things where the guys got it to a shape where they were happy with it, and then we can go to the community and the players and go, is this cool? And so it's kind of one of those things that we wanted to, and it kind of just fit where it landed. So I think it's kind of the way we like to work. Operation Underground is similar kind of development plan for that as well.
Yeah, I heard some stuff about Operation Underground. I heard a little anecdote about the person that made it, and how they've got obviously heavy links to previous Metro experiences that have been created for previous games, and something about part of the map being made as maybe part of a dev hack or something like that, or if part of it was made real quick. And was that sort of a driver? You sort of looked at what somebody did and went, okay, again, run with that, see what happens.
Yeah, so Inge Yoran, who was the original designer for Operation Metro, so we finished, he worked on, obviously drove a couple of the map pods for BF5. When we finished launching the game, he kind of just really wanted to make something that he wanted to make. Mm-hmm. Sort of that thing of like, just let me sit down and figure something. So, we wanted to give all the guys sort of time to kind of have that kind of time to go and think and do something that they're passionate about. And he kind of came back with this pitch for what's become Operation Underground, and we kind of all looked at it. We were sitting in a room, and we kind of looked at it and went, yeah, we need to make this. This is going to be super fun. And so we kind of just let him run and put a small team together, and that team sort of grown into a full-size map pod. But that was purely one of those things where we've kind of seen that if an individual thinks it's going to work and he can get his team excited about it's going to work, I really think that from a player's perspective, they're going to like it as well, because those seem to be the best types of maps that we create, and the best types of experiences are the ones that come from somebody just really wants to make it great. Mm-hmm. And sort of that's the sort of core behind it. And I think Freeman was in the studio about a week ago asking for concept art for EA Play, and we're like, there's no concept art for this. And he's kind of going, well, what do you mean? I'm like, we just built it. We just started. The guys had a really good idea. They just wanted to go, and so they just went. And then I think you guys have gotten your hands on it over the last couple of days, and I think the feedback we're getting from the community as well is going to help us shape that going forward as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience. It's not the remake that I think everyone thought it might be. But also it's the same but not the same. Do you kind of get what I'm saying there? Let's talk about a different map as well, Marita, which is the weird banana-shaped mountain map in Greece, on the border, I think, with Albania. I really liked it, and that one was made by the team at Dice LA, right?
Yeah, so the Dice LA guys took over, and they did. So we had them sort of take on they wanted to make the Battle of Greece, right? So they also built Mercury, and so they put these two maps together as a package, sort of two very distinct gameplay experiences, also very distinct visually, right? So the Mercury map, sort of that stunning Cretan island, big wide open spaces. And then they kind of wanted to, we talked about it. And we said I think we really need to create sort of something very infantry focused, sort of very fast, very sort of narrow, lots of lanes, lots of flanking routes. And they kind of went cool, and they kind of, found this sort of vista they wanted to create, and sort of they really sort of leaned into it. And I mean, they've done the both maps that they've done. I think they've done a fabulous job with them. I think they both play really well. They both play very different. And I think the nice one about Marita is that it's quite different than anything else in the game right now, so I think it'll be a nice change of pace for players. I mean, even if it's, if you're that classic Battlefield player that likes that big wide open spaces like you'll see with Sundan, I think even then it's just a nice palate cleanser for the community and to play with, and I think it also looks like, it looks amazing.
I think it looks really good as well. There's something about the color palette with the reds and the oranges. There's something there that, again, it's if you compare it to what's available in the game currently, it's very visually unique. There's nothing else that really looks like that. I definitely enjoyed it. I think it was a really interesting map, and obviously playing it with a bunch of other YouTubers who are obviously incredibly good at the game, it'll feel a bit different when it comes out. But I think it's definitely one for the infantry players out there. There's two other maps on the roadmap that are currently written as close quarters maps, and they are Lofoten Islands and Provence. Is that okay? And those two are earmarked for close quarters game mode. So could you go into a little bit of detail about those?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've noticed, and I think actually feedback sessions from the Game Changers, I think this kind of came out of, which was maps we should make sure that maps are actually designed to fit an experience rather than trying to make a thing that does everything.
Yep.
Make it do something well, and if you can sort of apply those things to a few other things, then that works really well. But sort of the best maps that you guys have seemed to have played are the ones that are sort of really designed to cater to your experience. So what we saw actually with the launch of Squad Conquest was, as an example, was this sort of group of players that sort of really like that style of gameplay. And we see that with things like some of the other small game modes, TDM, and even with frontline and domination type players, and those sort of group of players that sort of like that type of experience. And so, we've talked about there's been demand for more maps for Squad Conquest. How do we make these smaller experiences feel better? And so, we found that we could create a couple of maps that are different from the rest of the game, that kind of offer a different place of flavor that I think will help drive players into those smaller experiences, which just offer a different style of play for the rest of the game. And so those two maps are specifically going to be focused around that type of gameplay style, those sort of smaller type of experiences.
Okay, great. So we're looking at maps that, like you say, that are catered towards a certain type of experience. And you mentioned Squad Conquest, which was previously a limited time mode for you guys. Personally, I really quite liked it on the original maps that you guys brought it out for. I think it worked really well on Hamada. It sort of made a really good use of that ruined area at the top of the map that, in my experience, kind of sometimes gets ignored during the normal conquest rounds. There's been a certain type of reaction to limited time game modes within the core community. The wider community is, it would be impossible for me to ask everybody how they feel about something. I'm sure you guys have got data, but in the core community at least, there's been quite a lot of resistance or negativity towards those types of modes, taking them in and out. And recently with the front lines and domination removal. I mean, when you guys have to remove something like that, when you're creating these limited time modes and you see that kind of feedback, does that make you want to do it less, or does that make you want to, I don't know, do something different, or does it make you want to plow on and try and find a game mode that people actually like, or?
Well, I think, the big thing for us is the purpose behind a lot of these things. I mean, one of the things that with the way we've built the live service and the way we do some of the limited time stuff, the thing it really does for us is it allows us to take risks and try things that we would never have been able to do before. Okay. So if we need to create, for example, if we want to try and create the next version of Conquest, we need to, if we did it the old way, we would need to nail it. We would have to get it right. We would have to be perfect with it. And that's, with a game mode, that's really hard. And that's why, as you see, you've got Conquest in there is never going anywhere. Breakthroughs are a really strong game mode that I think a lot of players like. Something like TDM is that's just a game mode that I think every FPS has. But then when you want to go and create different dynamics in the game, it's really difficult. With the limited time game modes, for us, it allows us to try new things. So I think something like Grind, which is sort of a play on Conquest, but a very different specific gameplay type of experience. Doing something like that for a week, what that allows us to do is to see if people actually like that kind of gameplay style. Now, we may never use that game mode as a permanent type of game mode, but it allows us to help shape other game modes we already have, maps that we already create. So I think for part of this is to allow us to take some risks, to drive some innovation, and actually see what works. And I think if you look at Squad Conquest as an example, it started out that way, and it turns out that players like that particular small game mode more than any other small game mode. So we kept it, and I think that as in and of itself as a game mode, and completely. I think we're always going to try and tweak, because I think, as you say, there's always feedback from the community of what they like, what they don't like. But for us, it allows us to try new things. And the good thing is the community can say we don't like this, and then we can just take it away. I think if we say, hey, we've got we drop something in that becomes something with permanence and something that we must have this, you must, and we built an entire game around to support it. Then that's not if the community goes, we don't like this, it's really hard to take that away. So I think for us, it's to create that flexibility, to find out what likes, and to find out where the players want to go. So I think with these limited time game modes, that's kind of the reason behind it. And then when we look at, for example, domination and frontlines, what we get into that kind of experience for us is that the goal for us is to make the best game possible, and we want to make sure that everybody, our players are happy with the experiences they have. And when they're not playing those experiences and they're not enjoying those, we take those as that they're not good enough for them. So then what we want to look at is going, if those experiences aren't good enough for our players, then we need to do something with them. And I don't think leaving them there is the right message to the players. So that gives us time to take them back and make them good. And sort of devote the time that we have as developers to the things that players want, the things that players are good. And so I think for us, I think it's sometimes it's you've got a few players that like a thing, but with Frontlines is a good example. We were talking about that today with yesterday with some of the guys, is trying to take those things that they liked about it and how do we make that better? How do we make that for them and sort of reintroduce those kind of mechanics in a way that actually will get more players into play it.
Okay, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. There was a question that I wanted to ask. Oh yes, it was about the next thing that's on your roadmap. The private games launch that's going to come along in September, I think. Yep. September. Private games is something that I think pretty much since day -100 players were asking for, and I think it came as a surprise almost when it was announced that it was actually going to become a thing. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to find out about it a little bit before everybody else did. And it did catch me by surprise when it was pushed forward. From you guys, was there ever a want to have it from the beginning? And was it just, okay, it's not something that's high priority for us, or maybe we don't have the resources to do it right now? Or is it something that you went, okay, well, this is the structure we're moving forward with Battlefield 5. We're going to look at the Tides of War. We're doing all this other stuff. We don't feel we need it anymore. So is it one of those two things, or is it something completely different?
No, I think from us, and I have a special sort of affinity and attachment to what is now becoming private matches, in that I helped work on it, and I've worked in bits and pieces on it for a couple of Battlefield titles, and I think the big thing for me was learnings from BF1, and the feedback we got from BF1 was, if you're going to do it right. And give the community what they want, because giving them a feature that is designed for them that doesn't actually deliver that is actually significantly more negative than holding something back and delivering it right. And for us, it was just something we really wanted to do. We really wanted to get right, and it just took time to get there. And so that was, part of for us is why we sort of. I know we had a lot of people asking and a lot of the community coming after us, and it was really hard to sort of listen to the feedback from the community when we were working really hard to get to that point where we could actually roll it out like we did. But the reason for that is that we're trying to drive, from my own personal perspective, is when we commit to delivering a thing, we deliver it, and we deliver it at the level of quality that we expect. And so for us, it was always going to be there. It was just, how do we get it there, and how do we get it out to you guys at quality, and give you guys what you want, but also let you participate in that, because I think this is one of those features that. It's less for us and more for you guys. The way for you guys to develop your communities and grow them better and help us build the game. So if it doesn't work for you guys, then it's not a good feature for us to build. And I think now we've done a lot of work and we've done a lot of talks. And as you said, you saw it earlier than the others. And I think we're probably in a really good state where, obviously, if we delivered it day one, that would have been great. But I think delivering it right is more important.
Okay, That's a fair response, because I mean I got a chance to sit in that room when you guys initially pitched it, and even then there was a lot of like, wow, this is great, but even then there was feedback on what you guys had put into different phases that you were planning to build and stuff like that, and then we had feedback at that point saying, hey, maybe this feature's more important to be here, maybe that one can drop down if you're going to do it in the stages. So like you say, if it's better to do something right than to not do it at all or to rush it. Yeah. And maybe that's kind of actually evident in the Mercury map that's been built by Dice LA, because it is actually a very, very good conquest map in the way that it's laid out. And for Breakthrough as well, it's a really interesting experience.
And Marita as well. I mean, Marita as well, we looked at it with the guys as well, and it's let's take the time to make it right, because I think if the difference of 2 weeks can turn it from what it is today to what might have been okay, and now today with what we see with the guys here in the room playing it and the fans out playing it in the parking lot, I think 2 weeks, if it's 2 weeks, was worth it, because they're going to get better. They're going to get a better experience out of it, and I think that's the one of the things that Battlefield has done well, DICE has done well for a long time, is driving that quality bar, and I think we need to get to that point with the live services, just continuing that and make sure that when we make that commitment, it's an actual proper commitment.
Okay, great. And then obviously to the last part of your roadmap, the Pacific, which was really exciting, seeing that in the trailer and just having that flash up and get a really brief look at what you guys have a vision for there. Just tell me a little bit about it first of all, because I'll be honest, I didn't even realize the other day that you'd named one of the maps as what was coming out. I didn't even realize, so maybe you still know a little bit more than what I do.
Yeah. Well, I hope I know a little bit more than what you do. No, I think the Pacific is obviously, this is sort of the kickoff to year 2 of Battlefield 5, which is sort of that introduction of a new theater, sort of that big piece of the war that we haven't explored yet, as well as hopefully a new path of gameplay experiences that we can open up, because obviously from a historical perspective, the war in the Pacific and the war in Europe are two quite different conflicts. Obviously you've got the US and the Japanese army, so from a fantasy perspective, we get to tell completely different stories. From a gear perspective, it's a whole bunch of gear. The Japanese, some very Japanese iconic gear, some very US iconic gear. Obviously, with the Pacific, you're going to need a boat, because otherwise it's going to be really hard in the Pacific. And as you see, you look at some of those iconic, Pacific movies. You got things like the HBO series and things like that. You've got that iconic imagery of sort of that invasion gameplay as you kind of head up towards the beach. And I think trying to fulfill that fantasy with the Pacific is going to be really important as well. And obviously we want to give that package some gravitas for Chapter 5, so there's going to be 3 maps initially dropped in Chapter 5, one of them being Iwo Jima, 2 others which we haven't announced or named yet, but I think players are going to be really happy with those as well, each of them offering a different gameplay experience as we go. And then, as you say, you've got those iconic weapons, gadgets, and gear, and a nice package to sort of make those 2 new armies feel fulfilling. Okay,
well, from my point of view, there's been a lack of games in the past that have explored that Pacific theatre. There are some standout games that you can say that really did focus on it, but in general you always find a lot of those World War II games that will focus on the Western European conflict a lot more. Do you feel like with this coming so close to what would be the year anniversary of Battlefield 5 launching, do you feel this is kind of like a point that you guys can say, hey, and it's been kind of a rough ride for some of you guys along that way, and maybe some players have gone away. Do you feel like this is a point where you could say to the community and all the gamers out there that's like, hey, come back and give our game another go, because we're doing something big here?
I hope so. I mean, I think. I hope it's something sort of a refresh, a kickoff of of the experience, but not from a. I mean, again, I think the big thing for us is that the guys who are playing today and sort of really committed to it, and sort of really, we do see players enjoying themselves for the most part after sort of making it through thus far. A lot of it is for them as well, right? Is that we want to make sure that their commitment and their sort of drive to play is rewarded as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good time to sort of kick off. It's a really good time to sort of refresh and talk about the game again. And I think the great thing is it's that proper now. It's full on Battlefield. You've got land, sea, and air now in there. So I think that just it's just exciting to go back to that. And for the team as well, I think it's a really cool opportunity for them to actually sort of change the game. And it's something that I think it shows the studio's sort of dedication to this live service with Battlefield 5, and sort of just keep pushing it through. So the team's sort of being allowed to try these new things, so they can kind of really sort of, they look at the Pacific as even sort of, that's a new launching off point, but it's also a new way for them to kick off and restart the live service for them again, and kind of keep pushing that journey through as well.
Yeah, I think that was actually a question I was going to move on to, is like sort of commitment to the game. I mean, I personally think that there's a lot of I can't really think of the word, but like in the community in general, I think a lot of people mistake what you guys have done so far, and they look at different parts of what you've done and what you've delivered, and a lot of people say, well, that's simply not enough. And I go, well, you can say in certain areas perhaps there's not enough of what you wanted, but when you look at every part that has been added and things that have been updated and things that have been improved, there is a huge amount that you guys have already done in this first coming up for 12 months. And it's nice to hear you then say that this is our point where we want to take chapter 5 and be like the start of year 2, and we're going to push on from here and do more creative things, because I think there are sections of the community that don't quite believe that you guys are going to keep pushing on with this game, and there seems to be this idea that maybe because it hasn't done as well as everyone thought it might do, that there's a lack of belief or a lack of want to keep moving with it.
Yeah, I think for me the team itself, they love making Battlefield games. They love the game that they made. Obviously there's been some I guess the part leading up to from the launch of the game has been tough for the team. In terms of some of the feedback we get from the community, just for their own desire of what they really wanted to create. But I think the great thing is they're really sort of embracing the way we work nowadays. They're embracing the push. They're embracing the opportunity to go back and do things that they've never done before. I mean, even look at just something small like the updates that the guys made to Panzerstorm. Mm-hmm. That's something we wouldn't have done previously, right? We would have just moved on and forgot. I know the guys are looking at the maps that they've already created. I know there's always a big, there's a huge love out there for Hamada, obviously in the community. But then again, the guys are looking at how do we that bothers them in a good way. So now they're going, okay, I don't let we've made a thing that you're not happy with. We need to address that. And there's a couple of guys in the studio that love that kind of stuff. And the studio's showing them that allowing them to do that. And I think for us, we'll keep making this as long as the community keeps playing it. And I think for what we see is I think there's a really good set of bones around this game. There's a really good set of structure that allows us to build something great on top of it. And I think we want to keep doing it.
Well, that's great to hear. Okay, well, I'm pretty much done, but Flackfire's like standing about 6 feet away, and I was wondering if he might have a question that he might want to ask. Do you have anything to say? Because if you do, he's sitting here and no one's telling him to go away yet. So we might as well, if you have a question or two.
Okay, so one of the big things talking about the Pacific in particular. So I think you guys mentioned in the stream that you went to Hawaii. Mm-hmm. You have announced Iwo Jima. Did you actually go visit Iwo Jima?
I don't think I don't think on this one we did go to Iwo Jima for the photo scanning visit. I think for the photo scanning trip we did Hawaii because it offered the most in terms of we used those trips to basically gather all the the sort of content and the materials that need vegetations in order to build the map. So it's usually what we try and do is find the place that offers the most amount of all of those things in one place. From a research perspective, the guys did a ton of research on Iwo Jima. They did a ton of research on all of those locations to make sure that those maps feel as close to reality as possible. I think the guys, the art team specifically, takes that stuff very, very seriously. They take a lot of pride in making sure that those feel the way that they're supposed to feel, to the point that we have arguments over heights of mountains being as accurate as possible. And so I think when you look at the photo scanning stuff, that's really important. But a lot of the research that the guys do, in terms of just digging into pictures, into post history, into as much stuff as they can gather, it's a really important thing to them. I think I think probably we have more arguments in the office about what is accurate than potentially the community has with us. But I think it's an important part of what we do.
Okay, and you mentioned accuracy and having arguments about things. Obviously, you guys are really passionate. During one of our feedback sessions, we talked about kind of trying to maybe craft something like the maps and the treatment of the Pacific Theater is somewhat of a love letter to fans and knowing the expectations that they have, knowing kind of what's on the line. How do you try to meet those expectations specifically with the Pacific when we look at that? Because I know that's what everybody's real hyped about. How are you gonna try to stay true to that?
Well, I think with that's I think the tough part of the job sometimes. I think, as you say, I think honestly, part of it is help from you guys as well. In terms of making sure that we stay the course and having those external sort of voices come in and help us sort of making sure that we're meeting up the expectations of of our players. I think a lot of it comes from what are the core elements when we go back and look at the core elements of what makes the Pacific special, not just from a location perspective, not just from a gear perspective, but what's the fantasy that sort of that equipment and that journey embodies, right? You have some very specific images that come to mind of the Pacific, and one of them is, as an example, that sort of amphibious assault and the boats just sort of approaching the beach. One of them is sort of the lush vegetation and the ability to hide and do those kinds of things, or flamethrowers and all of these things that sort of come out of those images. And I think the design team and the art team spent a lot of time mapping out, not from a content perspective, but from an experience and a fantasy perspective, and then trying to make sure how do we build, picking very specific fantasies, and how do we build around those fantasies as part of the Pacific. And I think part of it is I guess skill. These guys have been, you look like someone like Lars who's been doing this for a long time. Part of it is skill, part of it is sort of gut, and then in the end you hope you live up to that expectation. The good thing with the live service is we can continue to grow those fantasies over time. But a part of this is a little bit of an art versus a science at times.
And you mentioned, different fantasies talking about amphibious landings. Is that fantasy going to get fulfilled?
Well, without going too far into the specifics of it, I think one of the big things we talked about yesterday is sort of the amphibious invasion type of experience being a big part of what the Pacific is for Chapter 5. So not telling you exactly how we're going to pull it off yet, but yeah, I think that's a big thing, is sort of what that sea play is going to feel like.
That was a great PR answer then. Thanks, Flack. So yeah, that's pretty much me done. Big thanks for answering those questions, and I don't know, both of us are pretty excited for the future. So yeah, again, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys coming out. It's fun spending time with you guys and just sort of getting a sense of the game, and I think knowing that you guys are excited and I guess optimistic about where the future is going for the game, because I know the team would be, the team's gonna be really excited to hear that feedback when we get back to Stockholm, and I'm excited as well, because the guys have put a lot of effort in. I think they're moving in the right direction. They're happy that you guys are happy to see where it goes.
Awesome.